Hey everyone, and welcome to this explainer. Right now, you and I are doing something pretty incredible, something you do roughly 20,000 times a day without even giving it a second thought. We are going to dive deep inside our bodies today to look at the sheer biological magic that happens with every single breath we take. Because, it's not just air passively going in and out, it is a highly sophisticated, beautifully engineered system that is keeping us alive right this second. So let's start with a really foundational question. What actually happens inside when we take a breath? I want you to imagine just for a moment the incredible microscopic molecular swap that occurs the very millisecond air enters your body. It's really not just about filling a balloon in your chest. The second you inhale, your body goes to work, actively pulling life-sustaining fuel from the atmosphere while simultaneously rushing to expel toxic waste. And it does the whole shebang in the blink of an eye. Okay, let's actually trace the pathway of that air. When you inhale, that air goes on a wild ride. From the outside world, it enters your nose, travels rapidly through the nasal passages, sweeps past the pharynx, and heads down the larynx. From there, it descends down the trachea, which is just your windpipe. But then, the pathway starts to branch out, kind of like an upside-down tree. It hits the bronchi, your main respiratory airways, and then divides into progressively smaller and smaller branches called bronchioles. It's basically this incredibly intricate microscopic plumbing system, and it's designed to channel the air deeper and deeper into your chest. Now, the ultimate destination of this journey is absolutely fascinating. At the very end of all those tiny bronchioles, the air hits a dead end, but a highly purposeful one. It arrives at the alveoli. The source material describes these beautifully. They're tiny, fragile little sacs that look a lot like a cluster of grapes. The air penetrates right down to the very bottom of these alveoli. And honestly, this is exactly where the magic happens. This is the precise location of the gas exchange between the air you breathe in and your blood. To truly appreciate how efficient this whole setup is, we have to talk about the numbers. In a healthy set of human lungs, you don't just have a few thousand of these little grape-like sacs, you have an absolutely mind-bending amount of them. We actually possess somewhere between 600 million and 800 million alveoli. Literally just think about that scale for a second. Every single time you take a breath, you're inflating hundreds of millions of individual microscopic balloons. And the reason for this massive quantity comes down to one simple engineering principle: surface area. Because we have hundreds of millions of these alveoli, the total contact surface area between the air you just took in and the blood waiting inside your lungs is staggering. If you were to add up the surface area of all those microscopic sacs, it approaches 100 square meters. That is 100 square meters of pure, life-sustaining biological real estate, all dedicated entirely to exchanging gases. To really visualize that massive scale, because 100 square meters is hard to picture, that is roughly the equivalent of an entire tennis court. Imagine folding up a whole tennis court, packing it perfectly, and stuffing it right inside your chest cavity. This massive, richly vascularized exchange surface is the absolute secret behind how your body can maximize the oxygen it captures and transfers into the blood in just a fraction of a second.
All right, let's zoom in on the main event, the exchange zone. We know the air is in the alveoli, but how does it actually get into your blood? It all comes down to the capillaries. These are ultrafine, microscopic blood vessels that physically wrap around and line the walls of every single one of those 800 million alveoli. The walls of these grape-like sacs and the capillaries are so incredibly thin that they are virtually fused together. They are right on top of each other. And that microscopic proximity, that is the definitive mechanism that makes this entire gas exchange possible.
Picture this as a rapid, highly coordinated visual change. On one side of this ultra-thin barrier, you have fresh air loaded with life-giving oxygen. On the other side, blood flowing through the capillary. Instantly, the oxygen, which we can picture here as bright blue spheres, quits the air, it physically crosses that incredibly thin fused barrier and plunges straight into the bloodstream. But remember, an exchange is a two-way street, right? At the exact same biological millisecond that those blue oxygen spheres plunge into the blood, the reverse is happening with your body's waste. Carbon dioxide, let's visualize those as gray spheres, is a byproduct your body desperately needs to get rid of. This carbon dioxide escapes from the blood, passes right back through that delicate capillary alveolar wall, and is rejected into the empty space of the alveoli. Let's look at the immediate result of this invisible swap. When the blood first arrived at the entrance of these alveoli, it was dark. It was really poor in oxygen. But as it exits this capillary exchange zone, it has undergone a total transformation. It emerges completely enriched, deeply saturated with life-giving oxygen. Your blood is now fully loaded and ready to do its job. Meanwhile, that carbon dioxide waste we dumped into the alveoli, it doesn't just hang around. Your body actively works to get rid of it. The moment the exchange is complete, your diaphragm relaxes, your lungs compress, and that CO2 is pushed all the way back up that branching respiratory tree and out into the atmosphere when you exhale. Literally, you breathe in life and you breathe out waste.
So, how does this all tie into the rest of your body? What actually happens to that newly oxygenated blood? Well, it acts like a super efficient rapid transit system. First, it leaves the lungs entirely via the pulmonary vein and travels straight back to the heart. Your heart, acting as this massive, powerful pump, forcefully propels this oxygen-rich blood throughout your entire circulatory system. Its one mission is to make sure this vital oxygen gets distributed evenly and completely to every single organ in your body.
Let's follow this freshly oxygenated blood as it travels down the arterial highways of your body. It finally arrives at its ultimate destination, the specific, microscopic cells that make up your organs. And it doesn't matter if it's a muscle cell in your bicep, a neuron in your brain, or a tissue cell in your liver. Every single cell is just waiting eagerly for the delivery of this oxygen. Now this is where it gets super cool. Notice the elegant symmetry of our biology here. At the cellular level, an exchange occurs that is the exact reverse of what just happened up in the lungs. In the lungs, oxygen went from the outside into the blood, and CO2 went out. Down here, deep in the tissues, the blood delivers the oxygen into the cells, and the cells push their CO2 waste back into the blood. It is a perfect continuous mirroring cycle.
But why are the cells so thirsty for this oxygen anyway? Well, the blood delivers this blue oxygen to actively fuel something called cellular metabolism, or more specifically, cellular respiration. Your cells are essentially like tiny engines that use this oxygen to burn the fuel you get from your food, creating the literal energy that powers every single movement, thought, and function of your existence. Without this constant supply of oxygen, those cellular engines simply stop running.
And just like any engine burning fuel, cellular respiration produces exhaust. In this case, consuming oxygen to make energy releases a direct waste product, carbon dioxide. As the cells generate energy, they're simultaneously generating this toxic gray CO2 waste, which immediately escapes the cell and enters the surrounding bloodstream so it can be cleared out.
So, the circulatory transit system gets right back to work. The blood recovers the CO2 waste from your organs and tissues. Now poor in oxygen, but heavy with carbon dioxide. The blood is driven through the veins, back through the heart, and pumped all the way back to those fragile, grape-like pulmonary alveoli. The cycle arrives right back where we started, ready to offload the carbon dioxide and replenish the oxygen with your very next breath. Our source material actually sums up this entire respiratory system perfectly. It says the dual role of this complex apparatus is simply this, quote, to capture oxygen from the atmosphere and extract CO2 from the blood to expel it, end quote. It really is a flawless system of supply and demand, and it's all mediated across a tennis court-sized barrier hidden right there inside your chest. So, as we wrap up this explainer, I want to leave you with this question. How will you think about your next breath? Now that you can visualize those hundreds of millions of alveoli, the ultra-thin capillaries, and that rapid-fire molecular exchange keeping your cellular engines running, I hope you walk away hyper-aware of the incredible, constant biological miracle happening inside you right at this very moment. Take a deep breath and appreciate the machinery at work. Thanks so much for joining me, and keep exploring.